How's everybody doing today? All right, excellent. My name is Saucier, and I teach at K-State. And I'm very, very happy to do that. I think that teaching is the greatest thing that I do at K-State. It is not the only thing that I do at K-State. For instance, I'm a professor of psychological sciences, more for my research than for my teaching, because that tends to be how things at research institutions work. But one of the things that I invite you to do, and this is giving away a lot of what I'm going to talk about later, is teaching is something to cherish. Teaching is something to value. Teaching is something you are privileged to do. And if you think it's not, try to get a tenure track position and see how that works for you, right? This is something that you should cherish. This is something that hopefully, after today's conversation, you're going to be more marketable for doing that, okay? So as we go through, you said questions at the end. I'm more a questions when you have questions kind of guy. So if you have questions in the middle, just raise your hand and we'll take them. Because really what I'm here is a resource for you and helping you learn how to write teaching statements. So I'm going to start out by asking a question rather than answering one. And the clicker is not working. So we're going to figure this out. But the question that I'm going to ask is, what is a teaching statement? And my question is not rhetorical. What is a teaching statement? I realize some of you are saying, that's why I came to this session. What's a teaching statement? All right, teaching philosophy. What's a teaching philosophy?
How you should carry out the teaching.
It's actually not how you should carry out teaching, it's how you do carry out teaching. Right? So what happens is teaching philosophy is going to be something individualized for each of you. Right? It's how you set up how you think teaching should work, how learning should happen, and how the practices are going to go and do that. But your teaching statement is more than your teaching philosophy. What else is it? Your teaching philosophy is going to be in there, but what else is it?
Teaching record.
It's going to be a teaching record. The teaching philosophy are ideas, but the teaching statement has to have evidence, right? If you don't have evidence that you are good at this thing, they're not going to give you opportunity to do it at their institution in that occupational job, right? Oh, thank you. So what's going to happen, there we go, is you've got a goal with your teaching statement, right? You've got ideas, you've got the philosophy, but you need to have evidence too, because your goal with the teaching statement is to do what? And this is a very easy answer. This is why you're all sitting in this room today. What is the goal of your teaching statement? It's to sell yourself. It's to get a job, right? The goal of the teaching statement is to get a job, right? You want to be invited to campus. You want to have the opportunity to show how good you are. The teaching statement's goal is effective self-promotion. I'm going to say that again. The teaching statement's goal is effective self-promotion. What do I mean by that? You're showing, you're not telling, you're showing how good you are at teaching. And you've got to do so in a way because there's self-promotion and then there's effective self-promotion, right? A lot of people try to self-promote and they come across as arrogant, as off-putting, as people you would never ever want to have time with. So what you've got to do is you got to do this in a way that makes you endearing. But it's hard to be bragging and endearing at the same time. And that's why we have workshops like this to try to help you down that way, right? So your teaching statement is going to have ideas. And it's going to have evidence behind those ideas to make people more likely, not less likely, to want to hire you. That is its purpose. And what generally that mean is you're generally going to have a page or two or three to give all of your ideas and all of your evidence to get someone to want to hire you to teach their students. So your teaching statement is inspired by, is going to document several things. The first of these is your teaching persona. And I'm going to talk about some of these in a little bit more detail as we go through. The second, we've talked about this a little bit already, is your teaching philosophy. And just to give you brief definitions, because if I were sitting in the audience right now, I'd say he's got to say something at least. The teaching persona is who you are. The teaching philosophy is what you think. And then the teaching practices are what you do. So it's going to tell me who you are as a teacher. It's going to tell me your persona. It's going to tell me your teaching philosophy. These are your ideas about teaching and learning. And then it's going to tell me your teaching practices. What do you do in your classes? What do you do with your course structure? What do you do with your assignments? What do you do on the first day that makes all of this operational? So that it's not just abstraction, right? It's how you actually bring these all together. And I'll tell you something, I've done a lot of teaching observations over the years, and one of the things that's a pet peeve of mine is when the teaching statement doesn't match the class I go to. Right? When someone tells me this is what I do, and then I go in and I don't see them do that. So what this needs to be is an individualized document that actually documents what you think and what you do. Because if you don't do it, it doesn't matter what you think. All right? So there needs to be a connection across all of these. And the teaching statement is going to give your goals and your intentions. What do you want to teach? Why do you want this job? Why are you going to be a match to this particular institution? And one of the things to kind of understand, and this is the same, I think, for research statements, diversity statements, and things like that, there's going to be a piece of these that is individualized for the institution that you're applying to. One of the other places you use teaching statements is with award applications. There's going to be something individual for each award that you apply to. So you're not going to just send the same one to an elite liberal arts school that you might send to a research institution. There's going to be something there that says, this is my intention to be good at your school. I've seen teaching statements over the time, because I've been on lots of hiring committees, where people say they're really, really excited about graduate students, but then it's an institution that doesn't have graduate students. I've seen a lot of times people say, I'm really excited to apply for your position at the University of Kansas. I say, that's great. That's not us, right? So little things like that. Your intentions have to fit the job. Your intentions have to fit the award. And all of this has to be documentable. Now, all of these should be focused around promoting student learning and success. We're going to talk about your teaching persona a little bit, and it really should be focused on doing things that are going to make your students more successful, more likely to learn. I don't want to hear about how many Fs you give. Because a lot of people say, I fail a lot of students, that shows that I am what? Again, not rhetorical questions. This shows that I am what? We give a lot of Fs in my class. Someone said it. I thought someone said it. I'm a hard grader, right? A lot of people are even hoping for something better than that. Shows that I'm what? Well, if you're aware of that, that definitely should not go in your teaching statement. But and that's this is worth saying just in case. All of the stuff you put in your teaching statement should make them more confident in hiring you, not less confident in hiring you, right? But a lot of people brag about the grade distribution in their class, having a lot of people on the low end of that grade distribution, because they think it says something good about them. What's the good thing they think it says? They have high standards. They're rigorous. There's an alternative explanation for that. What's the alternative explanation? Someone said something, missed it. What's the alternative explanation for your students not doing well? Yes? It might be you're not teaching very well, and that's why they're not learning. So when you're assessing their learning, they're not able to show you learning. That might actually not be a great thing. So one of the things that I like to see in teaching statements is the person talking about and genuinely believing, because you should not embellish and you should not lie, right? But actually believing that their job is facilitating student learning and success. That's the job in the classroom. Now, unfortunately, not every student is going to learn at the same rate. Not every student is going to demonstrate success on the assessments in the way that we might like. But I want to see a genuine commitment to student learning and success. Because that's it. That's what we do. And if that's not what you want to do, that's not great. Hey, how are you? You're good. You saw this talk a couple weeks ago, so you're all good. You want to demonstrate yourself authentically as a teacher. I said this a minute ago, and I'll say it again. You do not embellish and you do not lie. You must do you. You can't be me. You can't be Dr. Poole. You can't be Dr. Samuel, the other people that you're going to see talk today. You cannot be somebody else. You have to do you. And if you see somebody, I'm giving you permission right now, if you see somebody give you advice that does not fit you, if you go to a workshop and someone says you should do this in the class and it doesn't fit your philosophy, I am giving you permission to discard that advice. Don't do it because someone told you to do it. Do it because it fits who you are as a teacher. And what your teaching statement is going to do is tell me who you are as a teacher, not who someone else is. Because you are not someone else. And you cannot role play that position successfully for very long. And all of these things, your persona, your philosophy, your practices, and your statement, are intentional and dynamic. What this means is we decide what they are. We think about it and create these kinds of things. One of the things that I do when I teach is I think about what is the first thing I'm going to say to my class when I walk in? What is important for me to get that learning across? What activity am I going to do? And then if it doesn't work out, what do I do? I change it. That's that dynamic part. And one of the things that you'll find is you will grow as a teacher. As you get more experience, as you teach different students, and by the way, you learn more from teaching students who have a hard time learning than students who have an easy time learning. It's like mentoring. You get better as a mentor with the student who's hard to mentor than the student who's easy to mentor. Because what do you have to do? You have to change. You have to adapt. There is not one way to teach all students. There's not one way to advise all students. There's not one way to mentor all students. And what you get to do is to be dynamic in finding out what works best for you. One of the things that I've had the opportunity now, and I've been teaching now for over 20 years, one of the things I've had the opportunity now is to try out a lot of stuff. And what that means is a lot of stuff didn't work and I don't do it anymore. A lot of stuff only works for upper level classes. Some stuff works really well for first year classes. You get to decide who you are and you get to change. One of the things that I love about being a college professor is we have so many do-overs. What do I mean? What do we get to do? Second? Next year, every semester, all new students, right? And unless you get a repeat, and if it's a repeat, it's a sad story to start with, right? But unless you get a repeat, it's students who didn't know what you did last semester. So maybe that assignment didn't work, try something new. Maybe that philosophy didn't work, that grading scheme didn't work, whatever. You get to try new stuff. And in fact, every day is a do-over, right? If you teach 3 times a week over 15 weeks, that's 45 class periods. Every day you get to do a do-over. This is amazing, right? In all the kind of jobs that I can envision myself doing, this provides me the most opportunities to make up for the mistakes that I've had. This is awesome. Try something new, and if you're committed to student learning and success, they'll be happy to come along for the ride. Now, your teaching persona, this is how you decide to present yourself to your students. Now, it's got to be authentic. It's got to be related to who you actually are, but you now get to augment different parts of your personality. What is introversion? And I got some psych students in there, so they'll answer if the rest of you don't know, but what is introversion? Kevin's looking at the other psych students to see if they want it. All right, Kevin, what's introversion?
Basically just not being outgoing.
It's not being out, kind of being shy, want to keep to yourself a little bit more, versus extroversion, which is what? Being gregarious, being very social, wanting to be around other people. Now, if you're extremely introverted, it doesn't mean you have to demonstrate yourself as extremely introverted in class, right? All of us have more extroverted and more introverted times. All of us have times where we want to be ourselves. All of us want to be by ourselves, excuse me. All of us have times where we want to be around other people. You can choose to accentuate the extroverted side of your personality more. I consider myself an introvert. But I'm also aware that me being an introvert in class is harder for me to get my jobs done. It's harder for me to promote student learning as an introvert myself. Doesn't mean it's not possible, it just doesn't work as well for me. And what that means is that after I have the honor and privilege of talking to all of you, I'm going to go back to my office and die. Because I'm going to use all of my energy in here, right? Because it's hard for me to put out the effort that I need to look extroverted for the 45 minutes that we're going to spend together today. So you get to decide who you get to be. And you get to be different people in different classes as long as it's not too far away from your authentic personality. Don't be someone you're not, but understand you get to decide what role you're going to play in that class. Now, my goal for my teaching persona is this. Whatever you're doing today, do it with the confidence of a 4-year-old in a Batman t-shirt. And in case you don't know what that looks like, it looks like that. These are my kids, and my son is about 4 in that picture. I want to come in, I want to kick down the door, and I want us doing awesome stuff, because that's who I am as a teacher. Right? I come in, I own the room, I have a strong personality, I want to look extroverted, and all of these kinds of things. I want to be excited, engaged, and enthusiastic. If that's not you, don't do that. And to be honest, the reason that I do this in class is I've had success doing this in class. Right? They've mic'd me up. I'm never mic'd up. I don't need to be mic'd up, but they need this for the video recording. Right? I just naturally project. I walk around the room. Students have to follow me. I talk too fast. I get excited. That's my teaching persona. And if you don't believe me already, just keep paying attention. Right? This is who I am. But I've thought about being that person. I've thought about crafting that into my style as a lecturer, or my style as a discussion leader, or my style as a mentor. And this is awesome. You get to sit back and say, who do I get to be? And is that effective or not? My early teaching, I was figuring it all out. I was doing a lot of trial and error. I was terrified to teach. I'm still terrified to teach a little bit. And I used to have to do things like, I listened to my Psych Up song before I walked into class. It was Ants Marching by the Dave Matthews Band, and I would listen to that before every class. And I would do it in a Walkman. Anyone remember what a Walkman is? They have them in Guardians of the Galaxy when they go back to the 80s. So I had a Walkman, and I would walk around listening to Ants Marching on a cassette, and I would just pace up and down the stairwells in my building so that not too many people saw me doing my thing. And what would happen is I would go in and I'd try stuff out, and sometimes it would work and sometimes it wasn't. And one of the things that I would do is I would metacognitively look what worked and what didn't. What aspects of my personality did I accentuate that students responded well to, and what didn't? And then I found that it takes thought and effort, and it takes trial and error, and it takes practice to figure out who you want to be. And I didn't have a lot of guides in this. When I was coming up through graduate school, we didn't spend a lot of time teaching people how to teach. And I think this is a mistake. The assumption is that if you had a terminal degree in your field, you could teach it. That is ridiculous. Those are different skill sets, right? But the assumption was if you're bright and you have a PhD, you can teach psychological sciences. Well, I found out that you can if you try really hard for a long time and you're willing to put in the work and you go to workshops and you read and you seek mentorship and all of that. So what I found is that there's some things that worked for me that I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to give you what I think is a good starting point for developing your teaching persona. These are questions I want you to ask yourself. I'm not going to ask for your answers now, but I want you to ask yourself, who do you want to be in the classroom? Who do you want your students to see? Who do you want your students to interact with? And then be that person. What characteristics are you going to highlight? For me, like I've said, I've chosen to highlight extroversion. How you behave to demonstrate these, because it doesn't matter who you are inside, it matters what your students experience. So these are the kinds of questions that you're going to ask yourself in creating your teaching persona. And believe it or not, people are going to ask things like this on your interviews. What is your teaching persona? And if you've never thought about this, that's a hard question to answer. But if you have, and if you get feedback on it and you tried it out, it becomes much easier. Now I'm going to give you a starting point. I think we can start out by all of us, no matter what our discipline is, no matter what our personality is. We can start out by bringing peace to class. And I've written a little piece on this if you want to go read it, but I'm going to give you the overview of that now. I think that there's an acronym that is a starting point for our teaching persona that all of us can do. The first of these is preparation. Bring preparation to class. Be ready. Know how you're going to start class. Know what the activities are going to be. Know what your student learning outcomes are for the day. Right? Know what you're going to do. And just having your PowerPoints written out is not enough. Knowing your transitions are, knowing how to start class, knowing how you're going to bridge the examples, knowing how you're going to make transitions, knowing how you're going to involve your students in active learning, this all goes into preparation. Second, bring expertise. I'd heard a cliche once that teaching is convincing your students you didn't learn this last night. Any of you empathize with this? When you're doing a new preparation, what's a new preparation? First time teaching that class. When you're teaching a class for the first time, you often find out, wow, I had no idea that was the thing, right? You're going to be the expert. You're not going to be necessarily the expert in the world, but you're going to be the expert in those four walls. And you're going to know more than your students. If you are not knowledgeable as a teacher, that is a problem. Now, you're not going to fake knowledge. You're not going to guess the answers to questions without telling your students that you're speculating. You're not going to give them erroneous information, right? But if you are the expert and know most of the stuff most of the time, you can teach them how to get information to questions that you don't know the answer to. Or you can tell them I'm going to find the answer and then actually find the answer. Another of my pet peeves is when students say, I have this question, and the teacher says, I don't know, but I'll find that out for you. And then they don't find it out. I've done a lot of observations where the teacher did that to a student, and at the end they'll say, hey, what was that question the student asked you? And they say, I don't know. And they said, no, you didn't know because you didn't write it down. If you take 5 seconds to write it down, you're showing the student you care. No, go find the answer, you're showing them you cared more. We talked about this already, but you have to bring authenticity. It's okay to be human in class. Now, I don't think it's okay to be incompetent, but it is okay to be human, right? It is okay to make a mistake and fix it. Is it okay to let a student that you don't know because not everybody knows everything, right? It is not okay to try to be someone you're not. The fourth thing you're going to bring is caring. And there are 3 things you're going to care about. You're going to care about the content of the class. Because if you don't care about the content, it's not worth teaching. And if you don't care about the content, maybe you shouldn't be teaching that class. Because you're going to care about the content. You're going to care about your students, right? We started out that your job in the class is to promote student learning and student success. So you're going to care about your students. And then third, you're going to care about the experience of teaching your students in that class. You have to value that interaction. And when you do those things, it leads naturally into the last one, which is engagement. If you come in and you're excited about the information and you find it fascinating, you find it interesting, and it's authentic, what are your students going to do? They're going to get excited too. Guess what? When they're excited about it, what happens to their learning? It's going to go up. When you're engaged, they're engaged, they learn more. This is actually one of the hallmarks of my teaching philosophy called trickle-down engagement. When you're engaged and interested, they're engaged and interested, and they learn more. Are these things that you can prepare to be? Are they the things you can prepare to express to your students? Absolutely. So one of the things I'm going to recommend is that you take this as the foundation for your teaching persona and then adapt it to you. There are going to be other features you might add. There might be some other features you may de-emphasize, but this is up to you. This is a starting point for you. I wasn't giving a starting point. Now you have a little bit of one. Now that you know who you are, you're going to think about what you're going to do. And teaching philosophy is a signature narrative of what is important to you as a teacher. And the description of your teaching persona and the description of your teaching philosophy are going to be a lot of your teaching statement, right? These are the things you're going to talk about. So what happens here, the questions you're going to be asking yourself is, what is important for you to teach? How do you determine the material that you're going to cover? How do you determine how you're going to cover it? For interesting, when I teach, there are two things that I teach in my class. I teach the stuff they have to know, and I teach the stuff they want to know. The stuff they have to know is the stuff that the course is built into the curriculum for. So I have to ask myself, is this a prerequisite for other classes, right? What kind of students are taking this class? Is this a major requirement? Is this an elective for another department? So I have to think, what do they need to know from this class? Second, what's awesome? Now that I've covered the requirements, what is the super coolest, most interesting, cutting edge, phenomenal stuff that I can share with them? And this is actually where reaching and T-search start to overlap. Because what happens is, for those of you who are researchers, you're going to be teaching often within your field. It's those cutting edge discoveries, some of them may even be from your own lab, that you get to bring into class and share with them. Now they're on the forefront of the knowledge in the field. That's a pretty cool place to be. And you can tell them how cool that is. This is also related to what's important for your students to learn and thinking about how we now accomplish these goals. Teaching philosophies have to dictate teaching practices. And I'll say that again. Teaching philosophies have to dictate teaching practices. Otherwise, it's not really your teaching philosophy. If this is how you think teaching and learning should work, if this is what you think is important in your classes, if this is what you think is important to be as a teacher, yet none of that manifests at an operational level in your class, in your syllabus, in your course assignments, and the things you're asking students to do, then it's really not your philosophy. So there has to be an explicit connection to your practices. And guess where those are going to be described? In your teaching statement. So what's going to happen? I invite you to look for models. You're not going to imitate them, but you're going to take what you can. Here I've written an acronym. This is CASE. And this is actually, there's a CASE award that is given to the top teachers in the United States. For instance, on our campus, people like Greg Eislein and Mike Wesch have won the CASE award. This is amazing. Greg Eislein told me that CASE in this context stands for copy and steal everything. And what he's saying, and this is different in research, this you should not do that in research, right? But in teaching, if you go to a workshop and you see something that works, do that thing. If there's something I say in here that resonates with you, it's yours now, right? So with teaching, find things that work for you. You do not have to reinvent teaching. You can find models. But make sure rather than becoming Mike Wesch, Greg Eislein, or whomever, you stay you. You just use those to extend your effectiveness. Seek feedback and mentoring. This is hard. How many of you like receiving critical, constructive feedback? That's right, nobody's hand is up. Why? I think there are two human truths. First human truth is we're lazy. And the second human truth is we like to feel good. And what that means is if you're going to make me work, it better be worth my while, right? We're lazy and we like to feel good. Receiving negative feedback doesn't make me feel good, and it's going to make me work. So that violates both of those human truths. Except that the feedback will do what? It's going to improve me as a teacher. So if it's going to make me feel good to get hired and get tenure, then maybe I should seek out some feedback. And I would recommend seeking out feedback early. I'd recommend seeking out mentoring early. And the point that I make about mentoring, and this is something that I'm copying and stealing that other people have told me, is when you're seeking mentoring and teaching or in anything really, don't go up to someone and say, hey, would you be my mentor? Because that's scary. And that person's like, well, I got a busy schedule and I don't even know you, and that's crazy. But if you said, Dr. Poole, you are both a UDP and a Kaufman Chair, which if you don't know are the highest honors you can get as both a teacher and a researcher. I think you're only the second one who's gotten both. I think Harold Prince is the only other one. Second person in K-State's history to get both of those awards. If you were saying, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And you tell me how you've maximized your success here in both of those things. He's probably going to say yes. Why? Why is he going to say yes? He wants to share his knowledge, right? Now, I'm not saying anything about Dr. Poole in particular here, but as a psychologist, who is everybody's favorite person? Themselves. Who is everybody's favorite topic? Themselves. So what happens is, if you came up to me and said, hey, I'd really like to pick your brain about something you do well, I'm in, right? And 20 minutes, half hour, even 45 minutes over coffee, that's not a huge investment of my time. So one of the things I completely invite you to do is find somebody who does something you want to do and ask them for a short meeting, like I said, over coffee or something like that, pick their brains. And what you'll find is you've gotten a mentor. They just didn't have to invest in being a mentor in that scary relationship. So seek this, create this. And yeah, it's scary to send that email. It's scary to ask that question. What's the worst that's going to happen? Person says they're too busy. Well, you're no worse off than you were. And think about your experience as a student. You can all do this right now. What I did is I thought, when did I engage best and when did I learn best as a student? These are the best teachers I had in my life. And what I found is I did kind of an informal factor analysis of all the things that they did. And I discovered that all of them did two things. They engaged in their content and they believed in me as a student. Now, I'll say it again. They engaged in their content and they believed in me as a student. And I said, I'm a data guy. If those are two things that work for me, why wouldn't that work on other people? So one of the things that I try to do is I try to engage in my material and I try to believe in my students. But more than that, I show them that I'm engaged in my material and I show them that I believe in them. And then I write about that in my teaching statement. Right? These are things that you can do. You can use your experiences to pay it forward. And now you've got to showcase this. You've got to look for the patterns in what you do and why. It's not one thing. It's all the things. It's the approach. It's the orientation. It's the overview. I had a teacher one write in their teaching statement that they cared about their students and the only example they could give is they learned the students' names. Now, I think you should learn your students' names, but if that is the only evidence you can give that you care, that's not great evidence. Right? So this should be something that is a pattern. It's not a single thing, but a pattern in what you do. If you don't have patterns, it's time to get metacognitive and think about the patterns you want to enmesh in your classes. Name your philosophy. Rather than saying I do all of these kind of things, put a name on it. There are 3 names that I use for my teaching philosophy that I'll show you in a second. The reason that I use those as names is it allowed me to organize better, it allowed me to build it as a framework, and it allowed me to communicate my ideas. So now I can talk about things I mentioned already, like trickle-down engagement, which means that I try to be engaged. I try to tell my students why it is interesting, so they'll be engaged and they'll learn more. Right? It's shorthand. But now when I talk to people, say, oh, you're the trickle-down engagement guy. If you can name it, it provides some definition and some identity for who you are as a teacher. So now we're back to teaching persona. All of these constructs are overlapping. And then further demonstrate this through your assignments and your practices. If I look at your syllabus, if I look at the assignments you give out, I should see evidence of your teaching philosophy. You can't say that you're really invested in critical thinking and then all of your assignments are multiple choice exams. There has to be some connection between what you believe in and what you do. Otherwise, I'm not convinced you believe in it. My teaching philosophy consists of three things. Choice to learn, I won't spend much time talking about these, but these are just examples of how I can name it. Choice to learn means that I don't believe that my students are going to learn unless they're intrinsically motivated to do so. They have to want to. They have to see the value and the relevance for themselves. So in my class, for instance, showing up as one way in my practices, I don't have requirements in my class, I have opportunities. So I will offer an exam. It's not required they take it. Now, in reality, that's true of every single class any of us ever taught. There's no requirement for them to take the exam. It's just they have to live with the consequences of their decision. So let my students know, right now you have 0 points in the first exam. You can earn up to 175. I hope you take the opportunity. I recommend you read these chapters. Let me know if you have questions. It's great because students ask, do I have to? No, you never have to do anything. Do I have to read the chapters? Of course not. I recommend it. It's an opportunity for you to demonstrate your learning coming up. But no, of course you don't have to. I mentioned trickle-down engagement already, and then the power of the individual is I think students should get to use their voices. I tell my students the most valuable thing you have is your time, but the most powerful thing you have is your voice. So what will happen is in my classes, there will be opportunities for my students to use their voice. And I will validate that use, and I will thank them for using them. And their assignments, they will have a lot of choice that they get to create and using things that they find important. Now your teaching statement is going to take all of these things we talked about already, this persona, this philosophy, and this practices, and combine them for a purpose. They have that specific intention. And this could be a job application, a word application. This is promotion and tenure. That's what P&T means, right? So when you apply for promotion and tenure at your institution, there's going to be a specific objective that you want to adhere to. And there's some way that we can bring this to life. First of all, you got to own it. Use active voice. Use first-person language. What do I mean by this? Absolutely. It's I, right? It's my students, my class. Why? It's ownership, right? My philosophy is, I think it's important, right? Have to be in there yourself. This is about you. And this is where that effective self-promotion comes in. Show what it's like to be your student. This is one of the things when I'm on award committees in particular. I want to read your teaching statement and know what it's like to be a student in your class. I want to know what it's like to have you as a teacher. I want to have a moment with your statement, right? I want to be transformed into that situation. If it's too sterile, right? If it's too academic sounding, I don't know what it's like for you to actually communicate with me. So find a way and have other people read this. Am I actually coming through on the page? And there's got to be evidence. You started out with this a little bit ago, right? There's got to be evidence. You got to show me that you know that you can do this. You've got to demonstrate that this is how it's going to work. Otherwise, I can't believe you. Adhere to elective formatting guidelines. If they tell you 2 pages, it's 2 pages. Now, if they tell you it's 2 pages and you give me 1.25 pages, what does that indicate? Indicate that you didn't really fulfill on that opportunity, right? It should be as long as they tell you. Use teaching language. Now, use evidence of teaching language, but use teaching language. This means that there's certain buzzwords we do want to see. Like what? I've used a number of them today already. Active learning, right? Now, you got to show you know what it means. You got to show that you're actually doing it. But active learning is going to be one. Engagement's going to be another, right? Teaching and learning, critical thinking, application of knowledge, communication, community building. These are the kinds of terms you want to do. Intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. These are the kind of words that you want to embed because it shows that you know what? Do you know the language of teaching, right? You're kind of trying to join a club. That club has a jargon. Use the jargon, but show you know what the words mean. And personalize it to the opportunity. I kind of let off with that, right? If you write it to the wrong school, that might be a problem for you, right? If you're not knowing what those things are. For instance, if you're applying to work at K-State and you're telling me the classes you want to teach, which is something you should include in your teaching statement, use our course titles. Don't say, I'm really excited to teach this class, and it's not one we offer. That will show you haven't done what? You haven't done your research on my program, right? Show that you've done this. On the other hand, if you are using our course titles, like, wow, this person really wants to come to K-State. This is a way to impress the hiring committee. and believe in yourself. If you undercut yourself, what is undercutting? Yeah, it's underestimating yourself. So you even say something like, and I hope my students learn, right? I'm going to try really, really hard to try to get my students to come to class, so hopefully they'll learn. If I see language like that, that suggests to me what? You're not sure. I don't want to hire the person who's not sure. Now, to be honest, confidence, which is self-efficacy, and actual efficacy, how good you are, they're not that correlated, but we think they are. Right? We think the person who talks in very self-efficacy tones is also going to have lots of efficacy. So in conclusion, your teaching statement is going to showcase your teaching persona, your philosophy, and your practices. This is who you are, what you think, and how you do it. It's intentional, it's dynamic, and it should be inspiring. I should be excited. I should have that moment with you on the page. And what it's going to do is demonstrate you to be a unique and excellent teacher. We're going to have some time for some questions. I'll also let you know that this is my email address if any of you want to follow up later. And one of the things that we can do is we can provide you advice in your teaching statement. Happy to read them, happy to sit down with you. We also have lots of resources at the Teaching Learning Center potentially help you. We have a website up there where we have lots of resources about things like this. We have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a professional development series. And if any of you are looking for ideas about actual teaching, I actually have a YouTube channel where we talk about some techniques that you may want to try in your classes. So I highly recommend that you do this. But I want to use the balance of my time before Dr. Poole tells you about research statements to answer any questions you have. But the conversation doesn't have to stop today. What questions do you have? Yes.
I saw some examples where the person started talking about their background, where they came from and how they learned throughout high school to the university. Do you think that is important to have in your...
Okay, so the question here, and I'm just saying it in case they didn't get it on the stuff they're recording. The question here is, should I talk about my background as a student, for instance, and my upbringing in my teaching statement? The answer is, if it helps me understand you as a teacher and your philosophy as a teacher, your practice as a teacher, then yes. If you're just filling space and it doesn't actually make a connection to who you are as a teacher, then I'm not sure it's going to be as relevant. So if you're doing it intentionally to show me who you are as a teacher, absolutely. If not, maybe not. Yes?
Like you mentioned, you have to have a proof of your teaching experience. What if someone doesn't have any experience,
This is an excellent question. So what if you don't have the experience to provide the evidence? What I would do is I would give firm ideas about what you will do. So when I structure my classes, I will. And then I want to see concrete examples about how you're going to have your practices mirror your teaching philosophy. Now, I can't trust it quite as much because you haven't done it, but I do know that when you come to my institution, you have a plan for teaching the classes there. So that's what I would probably do in that case. Very good question. What else? And I think we have time for about one more. Yes, Kenny.
So you talked a little bit about using the course titles for that institution.
Yes.
Might you also be more marketable, say you have expertise in a course that they don't offer?
Yes, but you want to make sure that you're telling them you know it's not a course. So if you said, for instance, if you're applying to work here, let's say you're going to be a social psychology applicant to ours, right? So you say, hey, I want to come to K-State. I'm a social psychologist. I'm looking forward to teaching experimental methods. I'm looking forward to teaching social psychology, advanced social psychology, and psychology of personality. I'm also interested in teaching special topics courses on prejudice and discrimination, pro-social behavior, and aggression. Now you're saying, I know you don't have these, but this is where I can extend your curriculum. But if the only things you can teach are beyond the curriculum, now you have a problem. So I'd embed it in the curriculum they already have and then go to those special topic offerings that extend it. So yes, that will make you more marketable as long as you were marketable in the first place. Very good question. All right, and I think I'm about out of time, but one of the things I want to remind you is that the conversation does not have to end now. I'll put back up one more time in case you needed it, my email address. It's right there. And this is my favorite topic. I love talking about teaching and learning. I love talking about teaching philosophy, and I hope I have the opportunity to do that with you. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and good luck on the job market.
Thanks, Dr. Saucier, for a very interesting talk. So today I'm going to try to steal some of the energy that you have in this talk. So that's very valuable. And our next speaker for today is Dr. David Poole. He is the Kaufman Chair for University Distinguished Teaching Scholars and also a University Distinguished Professor. These are two titles, and I didn't know that Dr. David Poole is the second person to have that title. So, and we are looking forward to hear your talk. So, yes. Thank you.
Can folks hear me okay? Get to play. Well, I'm delighted you're here. Thank you, Sandeep, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to have a captive audience. But following Dr. Saucier is really a difficult thing, because I've had students that have spent 5, 6 years at this university, not because they're bad students, because they've got multiple degrees. And I've heard them say there's this amazing teacher, and it's Dr. Saucier. The best teachers, some of them from either multiple institutions or a sampling through undergraduate and graduate here at the university, they select him as their top teacher. So he's quite an extraordinary man. So let me tell you a little story. So Mark Twain one day is going to give a talk at this town. He's in a stagecoach with the mayor, and the mayor is also going to give a talk, but the mayor's a bit worried because Mark Twain, the famous author, is known as just an amazing speech giver. So the mayor's thinking how he can deal with this situation. So anyway, they get to the town and Mark Twain says, well, will you speak first? And he said, no, please, you must. So Mark Twain gets up and gives us just a stunning talk, like he always did, apparently. And anyway, then the mayor gets up and he knows he can't get anywhere close. So he says to the crowd, he said, look, he said, we spent some time talking, the mayor and I, on Stagecoach, or the Mark Twain and I, on Stagecoach coming in. He said, and we agreed that we give each other speeches. He said, and what you've just heard was my speech, and I'm afraid I've lost his, and just sat down. So now hopefully I've got your attention. Can I get full screen on this, please? So how many of you in here have your PhD already? And how many are going to be getting their PhD? Good. Confidence, confidence. I'm going to be getting my PhD, earning my PhD. Thank you for, is it possible to do that? I can work with that screen if you need. Okay. So what does doctor mean? What does it mean to have your doctorate and be a doctor? Anybody? You've been spending a lot of your life on this. What does doctor mean? It's actually surprising to me that so few people that have a doctorate degree actually know the answer to that question, so don't feel so bad. It's the adjunctive noun of the verb docere, to teach. So there's a lot. You may think, well, I'm going into primarily a research position. But research and teaching have a lot in common, and the degree that you will hold is actually to teach, to be a teacher. And so I'm going to cross over a lot of what Dr. Saucier said. And I can deal with that screen if we have to stay on that, don't worry about it. But what I wanted to do first is to just go through a few slides, show you a bit of who I am, and a little bit of my philosophy. It was working quite well earlier, actually, but anyway. So the beginning and end of what I tell you is going to be this extraordinary young man. This is, thank you very much. This is Dr. Stephen Kopp. He's an assistant, currently going through promotion to associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology. And he was sitting where you're sitting a few years ago. He actually came from here. And so what I've got is I've got his research statement, which is one of the best I've ever read. And I've got a set of copies here, so please come and get one. We'll also have ask Sandeep to put them online.
so you can take a look at these if I don't have enough copies for everyone that wants one. But it's a 2-page document. You need to introduce yourself in a language that's understandable. You need to tell them what you've done, your dissertation research, what your current research is as a postdoctoral fellow, what your future research agenda is, and almost always the most important is how you're going to get extramural funding. And in this part of the statement, there should be evidence that you've already done that. You've applied for pre-doctoral monies. You may not have always got them, but you should have that in there. So this is the flow we'll build to. But what I'd like to do is show you a little bit of my experience here at K-State. I've been here 24 years, and I'm obviously here because I enjoy being here. I enjoy what I do, although there are certain challenges with K-State. And what I hope I'll be able to do in my talk is just give you some of the do's and don'ts. And I can't tell you what a do and don't is for you, but I can tell you what a do and don't is for me and some of the lessons I've learned along the way. And this will help you not only prepare a statement, I hope, but really ask yourself about the kind of institution and the kind of position that you really want to go for. Okay, my position here at K-State is 40% teaching, 40% research, and 20% service. And I'm in 2 departments. I'm in the Department of Kinesiology, in the College of Health and Human Sciences, newly named. It was Human Ecology. And I'm also in the vet school in Anatomy and Physiology. And I'll go through some of the pros and cons of actually being in 2 departments. A pro is that it comes with lots of resources. A con, I'll get into that in a minute. So, anyone read Candide? Like a while ago, lots of people put their hands up. It's like Shakespeare. The classics, the definition of a classic is everyone talks about it, nobody really reads it. So it's great though. And it's apparently he wrote it in 4 hours one time. And it's a thin book, but there's this very naive individual who believes that in the best of all possible worlds, everything good happens. But what I've added to this is there's no place for inconvenient truths. Or is there? And so hopefully today I'll get to some inconvenient truths. So this is who I am. When I put myself into the Web of Science, and it lists publications, my publications and the areas. So I'm mostly a physiologist, but I have some biochemistry and molecular biology. I don't think I'm particularly good at these, but the Web of Science thinks I am. Cardiovascular, bit of anatomy, some sports sciences, kind of how I got into the business. And I know a little about the respiratory system and maybe some pharmacodynamics. So this is and this is very often like when I go somewhere and give a talk, someone gets up who's never met me before and they introduce me and I'm listening to them thinking, nah, it's not really me. So, but this is who the web tells me I am. Who am I? Well, I came here at the behest of a colleague of mine, Dr. Tim Mush. This is when I was a bit younger. And these are my 2 departments. I have a cluster of individuals which brings with it resources, it brings with it people who can relate to me, and it's kind of, I won't say a family environment, but a lot of people I can learn from, a lot of people who support me. If you go to the right job situation, you'll hopefully have a senior mentor or a more senior mentor. Tim was a few years ahead of me, and whenever I went for a promotion or something, I'd say, give me a package, and he'd give me his package, and I'd look at it, and I would modify his package for me. But actually seeing how someone's done something, having someone you trust where you're going and could relate and talk to is a real winning position that you want to be in one day. So what do I do? Just a little bit about my science. I'm interested in oxygen and oxygen transport, how it gets from the atmosphere down to these tissue mitochondria, and very often the structure I use is muscle. I'm interested in muscle. Without muscle, we'd just be plants or trees. We couldn't do very much. So being at K-State means I have access to a lot of animal models, greyhounds, horses, worked with elephants, studied with a colleague of mine, Professor Andy Jones, the women's world record holder, Paula Radcliffe in the marathon, finding out why horses blow their lungs out when they run, why do people get heart attacks, and what can we do to help them. All of these are tied together by a better understanding of how oxygen moves from the atmosphere down into our tissue. And that's what I'm interested in. I wasn't always. I grew up in a little town called Rhyl in North Wales. And it's really a spectacularly beautiful place, but the weather, you rarely see this view of Mount Snowden, our biggest mountain. But when summer comes, you get some sunshine. It's really beautiful. This is the Welsh dragon. Mark Twain called it a Welshman's mother-in-law. Yfed Goch. And who's been to Wales? Did you enjoy yourself?
I lived in Cardiff for about 4 years.
And how do the people from Cardiff pronounce Cardiff? Cardiff. Cardiff. They have a South Wales accent, a very lilting accent. When Dr. Saucier said, be yourself when you speak, one of my mentors was a fellow called Brian Whip, and he was from South Wales. And so I'd take on his accent, but not his persona when I taught or when I was up in front of a big, scary crowd, because I thought it was a lovely accent. And then I was Brian, not me. And that helped me. And Beth, where did you go? Dr. Monteleone? So,
Actually, just on the way to the ferry.
okay. The North or South Ferry? Okay. So if you went on the north one from Holyhead, then you'll actually go right by this town. So memorize this. You can get a lot of mileage out of this. Llan Bar Pwysgwyn, Git Colgerach, Chwyndor Boy, Llantysilio, Gogogoch. There's 4 L's together. What other place in the world would do that but Wales? So language is a bit of an issue there, as you might imagine. Very few people still speak Welsh. I'm not one of them. I'm not fluent anymore in Welsh. But anyway, so I left Wales. But it's a great place to grow up. Here's my mum arriving from Africa, where I was born, actually, with me and my brother, Richard. And we grew up on the beach, joined Boy Scouts, used to swim. I was quite a good judo player. Not good enough to earn a living at it, or make the Olympics, but not far off. I used to play with rugby, used to go fishing, sometimes poaching fish in the rivers and lakes. Used to dive off cliffs, stuff whenever I went to the south of France. And I really enjoyed hiking in Wales. So it was a great place to grow up, but I knew that I wanted to be further afield, and the opportunities that America had for a career in science, which I didn't even know I wanted then, were obviously spectacular. So here's my trip. I earned my bachelor's degree at Liverpool Polytechnic, now John Moores University. While I was wandering off around Africa, I took a year off, backpacked from Cape Town up to Cairo. While I was doing that, I was thinking about the rest of my life, and I thought, America, maybe science could be fun. So I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to UCLA, came over here in my master's and PhD, kinesiology and physiology, won some funding from the NIH and the American Heart Association to do my postdoctoral fellowship and become junior faculty at UCSD, San Diego. And then I received a phone call. I'm sitting at my desk one day, and my phone rings, and it's Dr. Tim Mush from kinesiology and anatomy and physiology here. He says, "Oh, David, got a really good position. You should come and look at it." I said, "Kansas, no, not interested." So he wheedled at me a little bit, and I had a couple of other good job offers at the time. And I dwelt on it, and I came out, jumped on a plane, came out, and I was captivated. I really enjoyed being here. You know, it had good university, really friendly people. I had a couple of young children who, you know, I was a bit scared in the city in San Diego because at the time there'd been some horrible murders, and society wasn't as free and nice and fun as I'd had growing up. So I thought, small college town, Manhattan, fantastic. So I applied for the job and I got it. And I'll get into some of that a little later. And then in 2000, they invited me back to John Moores and awarded me Doctor of Science, which is always nice, because in Britain, it's an award that recognizes that you've actually moved your field forward. But I'm not just me. This is my mentor, Brian Whip, the Welshman, who I used to ape his accent once in a while. And these are a cluster of individuals to whom I owe my career in science. And I am the product of them, but I like to think I've blended them and gone beyond what they've done in a way that was useful to me. But if you have mentors that are known and recognized in the field, in your statement of purpose, in your statement of research, then some of that, without wasting a lot of room in it, should reflect who your mentors were, because that name recognition, or the recognition that you are a product of excellent people, will get you a long way. It may, in fact, get your foot in the door for an interview, and then it's up to you to prove that you're worthy of a job offer. There's an issue. when we talk about teachers and we talk about research, and there's a view that I will die opposing. And it's John Henry Newman wasn't the first that said this, but this philosophy unfortunately lives at the university. To discover and to teach are distinct functions. They're also distinct gifts, not commonly found united in the same person. Well, John Henry Newman. And this view, when you go back and look at the history of it, as I have, probably originated with along with the first universities in 900, not BCE, before the Common Era. Certainly they were entrenched in the University of Bologna, the first one in Europe around 1100. So there's this idea that folks have that you can't be good at research and teaching. And I oppose that. I think they are the same thing through different eyes. And here are some of my heroes. This is Jared Diamond. I knew him at UCLA. He was my kidney professor in medical school there. And he can write books, win the Pulitzer Prize, and also do first-class research. He was so good that he held a full professorship in the departments of history, anthropology, archaeology, medicine, and physiology. So quite a winner. Obviously, he could do this. This is E.O. Wilson. Sorry, the camera's taking him off there. But he's a bug guy. He talks about ants, and he researches ants. And this is a fantastic book that you might do well to read. Edward O. Wilson, Letters to a Young Scientist. Straightforward. You read it in an afternoon. It's got really great lessons for starting off scientists. And one fact that he tells us is that new faculty are most often hired based on research expertise or potential, with the bar set for teaching being, are they adequate? And I've been on many search committees here and elsewhere, and I'm sorry to say that this is a common view. Okay, and I think listening to Dr. Saucier, one recognizes how errant this view is. You know, I really believe there's complementary sides of the same coin. So hopefully you're researching something that people see as important. My hook into things was that I want to understand how, when people have a heart attack, we can get them back to this situation here. We can make them healthy again. We can understand how best to do that. And that's something that I've worked with Dr. Mush on, and it's something that's brought us some national prominence. But my statement of research when I wrote to this university told them I could set the world alight. I really did. I gave enough information that they bought into the idea that I could get funding to take people from here to here, and that I could sell myself to the National Institutes of Health and the American Heart Association, who are the main funders in my field. So much as E.O. Wilson, his advice to young scientists is to research something nobody else is looking at. This is the words of Mark Twain again. And I study the microcirculation. I look at the smallest blood vessels in the body here, these little tiny things that are 9 billion in the average person. And the microcirculation fits the definition of a classic. It's someone that everyone talks about, but nobody's read. And so I was in a field that was a very big field of heart failure and oxygen transport, but I brought myself down to a position where I had something that was unique and different to what other people were certainly doing here, and was very unusual to be doing across the States or on the world stage. And a view that I've had is one expressed here by Karl Popper, originating from him, I believe. The wrong view of science betrays itself in the craving to be right. So what does this mean to you? What it means is what Don Saucier was saying, that if you portray a different person than you are, I think people kind of find out about it. So you have to be very honest with your research statements. You know, it has to reflect who you are and what you're going to be doing for the next few years. That may change, but your statement has to reflect something. You've got a designated research path that is 1, fundable, 2, interesting, and 3, fits into the faculty that you want to be a part of. And that fit is probably the most important thing that you need to convey in your research statement. Okay? You must fit, and you'll demonstrate that fit when you get an interview. But to get that interview, your research statement has to convince them that you have the potential to be a world-class scientist in your field, that that field is marketable and it's fundable, and that you know something about the university you're going to and can collaborate with the faculty that are there. And all of those things, along with a reasonable personality that you'll demonstrate on the interview, will hopefully get you that job. So it got me a job here. I got a chance to walk a little bit on the world stage. This is the Royal Danish Academy of Science and Letters. I was looking at something that was, to me, in a not very novel way, and it got some recognition in other countries around the world. And this was the basis for me getting the University Distinguished Professor here. I got to oppose some of the work of August Krogh, who's the Nobel laureate, at his 90th anniversary symposium. And this is a great building. It's about 400 years old. The Danish Royal Academy of Sciences got the old artwork around the walls. And so they knew I'd been doing this talk about how capillaries, I believe, really work. And so they invited me to speak here, and they got descendants of the great August Krogh, the Nobel laureate, to actually come and listen to me. And so here's actually Krogh's daughter, Bodil, and she's actually smiling. So I got out of there with my life, but I was, you know, as a researcher, sometimes you have to be controversial. You're breaking new ground. You will annoy other people in the field. You have to have the courage to do that. Maybe someone in your research statement, they need to get that idea from you, that you're doing stuff that is novel, that will advance science, that's important, and that if it is controversial, that you won't be a fading lily, that you will be someone who will have the courage of your convictions and can take that beyond their institution. So that's what I looked in oxygen transport. These are little capillaries here, and this blood flow going through these capillaries doesn't work so well in heart failure. Okay, a lot of these capillaries, these are in muscle, don't flow correctly. And we know that if we can correct that situation, we can help people with heart failure. And there are 6 million in America and countless millions around the world today. So that's what I look at, and that's what I try and convey in my research statements with those ideas. What I'm doing is novel, it's important, and it's fundable. But I'm in 2 departments. So I add a cautionary note. 2 departments were good because the Dean for Research at the time said, put a deal together where I could get enough equipment to hopefully be successful. But being in 2 departments brought resources, brought extra colleagues that I've shown you and talked to you about, but ended up with me, I'm the light blue. And these are the average for the departments I'm in this other bar here. So I ended up doing a lot more work than a lot of other people. And really, I'm 25 years old and I just look a lot older. No. So what didn't I do properly? Well, I didn't negotiate properly. Once I got offered the job, what I should have said was, well, seeing as I'm in 2 departments, I can't be expected to do a full teaching load in both, but I thought I could do everything. Thought I could walk on water. You know, I was young, I was enthusiastic, I really wanted the job, it looked great, but I didn't negotiate as well as I can. When they've decided that you get, from your interview, that you are the #1 pick, then you get to negotiate a little bit with them. And that's really exciting. And that negotiation, that is probably the most powerful time you will have to negotiate your startup package, your teaching commitment, and other things. So this is what my day looks like. This is an average day. My lab is over here in Vet Med, okay? And these positions are the meetings I have in a typical day or a typical week, all around campus. So I actually am in shorts today because I have to cycle around campus. If I walk, I will get my 10,000 steps, no trouble, but it can be challenging at times. So when you're looking at a position, you know, you've got a lot of things to deal with. The most important are, do you really want the job? Do you have a good colleague there who can mentor you? Or are there people there that are reasonable you can talk to? Very often, universities want one of each kind of person, or departments want an expert in these different things. And you don't want to go to a place where you can't relate to people, even with telephones and fax machines and Skype and all the gizmos we have nowadays. It can be challenging. There's nothing better than to be able to walk down the corridor and talk to somebody who understands your language, and you can work on ideas. You can grants together. You can work on science together. And you need to be in that environment. And sometimes universities don't understand that. They want you because you've got the chance of making money for them, and you can make a name for the university, and you can fill the position they need. You can do the teaching, you can do the research, but they've got to do right by you. So I ended up here. I won't say ended up, I hate that terminology. I'm here. I've got a fairly heavy teaching load, and I'm also trying to get my research done. So how do we get those two sides together? Okay, and exercise science departments, kinesiology, so on. They're cash cows very often for the university. They've got a big student to faculty ratio. And this is a class I taught with. This is illegal. And I know we have Dr. Montalona here in the room. So I hesitate to show it, but we actually had students sitting in the, on the stairs here. Totally illegal. Big teaching load. This is how some folks get to a university. They are the cheaters in their field. And because they can run so fast and they can do what, they can make it rain very often. That's how they're perceived. So they get loaded down with pointless meetings, carrying other people's weight, and they get sink in the academe swamp. Okay? They buy into the status quo and don't have a scientific footprint. Whereas if you let them go, if you unload the faculty, when you get your job, then be a card-carrying scientist, get a big academic footprint. And this is where you want to go without getting stuck here. And that's something that you need to think of when you're applying for a job. Don't go to a place that would do that. Don't be arrogant. This is great Socrates. I cannot teach anybody anything, I can only make them think. Okay. How do I do things? How do I succeed? Well, I picked a university where I had a really good colleague. I could put together relationships that helped me. I could build an international network of colleagues. Sorry, this is in the way here. People around the world who, things that I cannot do here, I extend my reach with these people. My introductory letter, research statement, actually talked about building this network. 25 years later, I've got the network. These people are brilliant. They teach me things. They can do things at their universities I cannot do here. So how do we put together teaching and research? We've got to put the spotlight on our classrooms. And this is what I did. I used teaching as a tool to recruit folks to my laboratory. All of these individuals have doctoral degrees, MD, DVM, PhDs, and they started off as undergraduates here. And Elena Colburn is in the audience and smiling because her husband, Trenton Colburn, is an NIH predoctoral scholar who actually was one of these students in the classroom. If you teach well, as Dr. Saucier was talking about, you can recruit amazing students to your laboratory. Really amazing. And there is Trenton Colbert. So how do you do that? Well, you try and send a good visual. This is the heart you want. It's beating nice and strongly. This isn't the heart you want. This is one that's had a heart attack. See, it's pitiful, little tiny beats there. It's not pumping blood. This person's in heart failure. This person has a different kind of heart failure where they just have a very small ventricle, big, thick muscular wall. This is someone that's had high blood pressure for years, okay? But if you can convey things with pictures, it really helps. The research statement I'm going to give you doesn't have a good picture in it, but if you have one that epitomizes your research program, think about putting it in your research statement. Acknowledge your limitations. 15 years ago, we were happy to get an email. Today, Now, email swamps you. And you spent 6.35 years of your life deleting spam from your email. Got to focus on the ball. I think the greatest impediment to scientific progress isn't ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. Great words from Daniel Boorstin, the Librarian of Congress, in his book. Admit your ignorance. Okay, this was a map before Columbus came and supposedly found America. Okay? This really didn't inspire other people to look around the world. We thought we knew everything about the world. This is a map after Columbus. No place names on there. We know we don't know a lot about the world. And this is what it inspired. Fantastic things. It's okay at a certain point to profess ignorance, but your research statement should not profess ignorance. One thing that's kept me alive at K-State is a sentiment that's expressed in 12 Rules for Life. Who's read that? Jordan Peterson? You read that? It's a good book, isn't it? Interesting. When he talks about lecturing, he says, don't lecture, have a conversation with people. So hopefully I haven't been too preachy for you. Now, what do universities really want? They want to promote critical thinking, explain an issue or problem clearly and comprehensively, use evidence and information effectively, analyze context, assumptions, and perspectives, formulate a thesis hypothesis, draw logical conclusions. And that is research. So when we're talking about the philosophy of being a university, trying to bring teaching and research together, I think they belong together. I don't think should be divided or divisive. And your research statement is a teaching tool. You mustn't go over a couple of pages. They may give you guidelines, as Dr. Saucier said. But when you come to write that statement, you're going to have to acknowledge that most of the people who read that are making a decision about whether you get an interview or not, they're not specialists in your field. If you're lucky, you have one, maybe two specialists there that could understand the kind of language that your science is. So it has to be clear, and it has to be understandable to a reasonably intelligent person who is not in your area. It needs to have a lot of impact. It needs to be straightforward, but the language of your research statement cannot be something that only specialists in the field can understand, because typical search committee here at this university, or the ones I've been on, has between 8 and 20 people on there, and they all get a vote. Okay? There may only be 3 or 4 in the actual search committee, but everyone in the department will get a vote on who comes to campus. When you get to campus, when you think about the resources, there are loads of resources that can help us put teaching and research together. I think science teachers should be given playground duty. But you need to inspire people. Your research statement has to inspire people. You can change the world. One of the ways that I keep myself real is that we all go on a first name basis. Titles don't mean much in our laboratory. I think keeping an active mind, it's good. Most of all, decendo discimus. To teach is to learn. And the great universities around the world acknowledge that. So when you write your research statement, it's a teaching tool. You're going to teach someone the science that you've done. Okay? In the general opening introductory statement, this should be something that everyone can understand. And it can convey your passion without getting lugubrious, without getting into details that the average person wouldn't understand. On your dissertation research, you spent a lot of time talking to folks about this, to your mentor and people who are acolytes. They know and understand what you're doing, okay? But now you've got a different audience, and now you have to put these in words that folks can really understand. So this will be a short paragraph. This might be a slightly longer paragraph. If your work, your dissertation research, has been cited, if there's been interest in it, this is a good time and a good place to tell folks, yeah, you know, despite the fact it's only just been published or it's only been out a couple of years, you know, we've had 8 or 10 people have cited this already. So it's a time to really sell yourself and show that your dissertation research is something that is important, that is something that is, will bring renown to you and therefore to the university. Then you can tell them what you've been doing as a postdoc, what your current research is. Okay? And this is really the foundation for what you will be bringing to that university. Okay? They will look at what their faculty offers, and they'll be looking for fit. Does that fit at the university? So your current research, what you're now doing, hopefully links to some of the faculty where you're going to be going or extends their work. This is a place where you can say, okay, this is what I'm doing at the moment, and this is why I'd like to be on your faculty. Not that I want a job. It's because there's people there that can help me grow as a scientist, and I can help them. Collaborations go both ways. If I was on your faculty, I would bring this expertise. I bring some of these techniques that are world-class to your faculty. Future research agenda. This is really good fun, okay? This is where you want to go in life, and it can go beyond the typical 5 years. It can be 5, 10, 15 years. What are the huge questions of societal importance that you're going to address with your research? You may think, well, I'm just looking over here in this little narrow area, but this is a chance to say, hey, you know, these are the global implications of what I'm doing. You spent a lot of time and effort crafting this research agenda, and now's the time to say where it can go. And this is where you say, hey, when I come there and you give me the resources that I want, you don't say that, but that's implicit, you know, this is the potential for my research. And this is the potential for me to be a solid citizen at your university. Just like Dr. Saucier said, that statement here is germane, directed at where you want to go. This is your chance to show them that you've done research for their university and you know enough about the faculty that you know you could survive there. You won't be on your own. You're linked to other people that will enrich your own research program, your ability to collaborate, bring in collaborative grants, more important now than it has been in previous, I think, generations. And built into that is how you're going to get extramural funding. I mentioned earlier NIH, National Institutes of Health, and the American Heart Association that are particularly appropriate for me. But different universities and different states have local funding agencies as well. And it's worth the time to get on a website, to get on the university website, see who funds people in that state that you're doing your kind of work. There may be personal foundations, there may be other state agencies that are really looking at mandates to fund science in that state. Kansas, for my field, doesn't do a great job. Okay, so I've gone for national money, not local money. But if you take the time to look what's there, this is another way of showing people that you've personalized your interests. If they want to bring you in, what is the most important thing about you that if you come to that university, you can do? Be successful. They want to give you all the resources you need to be successful. If they hire you and they give you a startup package, physiologists now get $300,000 to $500,000 on average startup package. That is a massive investment in the university. If you come to the university and you're not successful and you leave, they lose that money. It's gone. Now they have to search for someone else, try and put another package together. So they want you to be successful. And you have to convince them in the research statement that you can be successful at their university. It isn't just I needed a job and I'm coming there, because if you're not in it for the long term, they are going to lose money from you. And if in 6 years' time, when you've been there as an assistant professor, if you are not worthy of tenure and they have to, as they say in America, let you go. In Britain, we say fired. You know, you're gone. then the search committee has failed in its mission to bring someone in that has longevity at their department. And Dr. Saucier may listen to this later, but one of the things I'll tell you when he's saying prepare for classes, and that's really important. But what I did was, before I came here, I went to people I admired, a couple of my mentors, and I said, look, those courses you're teaching, can you give me your slides? So I had their slides. So when I came here, I wasn't developing all my own courses. I said to the university, you need to teach these courses. They're really important. And there were courses that I brought with me. So I got a lot of time to start my research program without writing new courses. I did write new courses, and I wrote what the university needed me to do. But when I walked in as an assistant professor here, day one, I knew that I'd have, if I was put into the classroom in a given situation, I already had the core information and wouldn't have to spend time taking away from my research agenda to write new courses immediately. That would come later, and that's fine. But at the time when you come in, you're doing a lot of things you haven't done before. You're setting up maybe setting up a laboratory for the first time, getting used to a new faculty, forming relationships, and that can be a very, very busy time. And the commitment to write new courses, if you come to a university, you know what you're going to be teaching, it's something you're expert at, that's fantastic. And there's a way of doing that. They're bringing you in, you're the expert in your field, and so with your research statement, when they're reading that, even though it's not your teaching statement, it should be a tool that is good enough to teach them something about you and to convince them that you've not only got a plan of research that will work, but you just won't be adequate in the classroom, but you'll be very good indeed. So what I have here, and please come grab them. I've got these here, which is Dr. Stephen Kopp's research statement that goes through systematically and shows you some of the things I've been talking about. And it's the best example I have to hand of doing that. So please grab one of these. If there aren't enough, could you please send it to everyone that signed up? Could you just...
I'll email you and then I can get it.
Okay, okay. So thank you for your attention. And I have 5 minutes for questions, I believe. Yes.
So sometimes they require cost estimates.
Yeah.
So how can I figure out how much money I can get from this particular university?
I've never actually seen cost estimates in a research statement. Okay, that tends to be when an individual is interviewed. If you're good enough to get an interview, then that is, and then get offered the job, that is when the money comes into it. Okay, if you're in a very expensive field, if you need a certain, if you're in physics and you need what are you in?
Physical chemistry.
Physical chemistry. Yeah, hugely expensive pieces of equipment. In physiology, there's equipment sometimes that runs well north of $1 million, and that can be an issue. But again, it hasn't come up on the initial research statement. I haven't heard people discussing, who will bring into campus based on what they would cost. Because very often, and what I would hope the way things work, and it has certainly in the searches I've been on, let's get the best scientist here. Let's get the best one, and then it's up to the university very often to see if they can put the right relationships together to bring that person in with the equipment. And I've seen collaborations across campus. I've seen collaborations with universities in the state to get access to that kind of equipment, and even state funding initiatives to do that. But I've never seen that kind of information in a research statement. It certainly does, but it isn't, for physiologists, I haven't come across a situation where, and physical chemistry may be an order of magnitude more expensive in the equipment, but then you should be possibly looking at jobs where the equipment will be there, because maybe they won't buy it for you if it's $20 or $30 million or more. I can't see them buying it for you, so you'll be geographically limited to where has that really expensive equipment. Here at Kansas State in physics, we've got someone in the audience who knows a little bit more about this than me, so I'll be careful what I say. But there was a time at this university where we knew another university was closing down its physics initiative or this whole department. And so we went out and we got this whole physics department to come here. Now we've got one of the best physics departments, I think, in America for high bay physics, something I don't understand a lot about. But that was a consortium where they actually put in massive money to bring in the group and have the equipment here for them. But for an individual single person looking for a job, I think that's beyond the research statement. And each search that I've been on, when we identify the 3 people to bring to campus, when they come to campus, things are going well. In the exit interview, when they sit down with the department head or the dean, that person will ask them, roughly, how much will it cost to get you here? What equipment do you need? And that's the time when you say, hey, this is what I need. You've thought it through. You'll maybe have some documents. You'll have a guesstimate to within, $100,000. And that's the time. I haven't seen it ahead of time. Thank you. Other questions? Well, I wish you good luck. That's an exciting time in your life. It's an absolutely brilliant time. And it's also scary, but the way I looked at it when I was sitting where you are now is I always looked at it as an opportunity. I didn't look at what I was leaving behind. I always looked at what I was going into and the potential for what I could create of myself. And that depended on where I went, having the right blend of people and obviously the right resources. And so I wish you all the luck in the world with that. There's a lot of serendipity, but there's also, some very, very good planning. And the most important thing you can do is get your foot in the door. So I had 3 of my doctoral students, after they'd gone and they'd done the postdoc, they call me up and they go, I'm thinking of applying here and applying there. So I write a lot of letters for them, and that's all good. And then I got a call one day, and one of my students my ex-student said to me, just 1 second, said, look, I've been offered 3 jobs and I don't know what to do. I hope each of you is in that position one day. I've been offered jobs and the biggest problem you have is deciding which job you want. And that is the best situation you can be in. And that will come from you personalizing your research statement, convincing them that you are a good fit, both in your writing and in your ability to talk to people and demonstrate being a good fit when you go to that university for an interview. Good luck to each of you. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's on.
Okay, thanks, David, for the talks. And we hope we'll have similar kind of positions like your former students, and get to choose from some of them. So, okay, and our next speaker is Dr. Brian Samuel. He's the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. So he'll be talking about diversity statement today.
If it believes this, can you get this back to me?
This is, yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I'll leave that as my first one. So please take that back.
Yeah. No. Mm-hmm. Okay. Great.
Let's see, can't see. No.
Postdoc Association 2019.
Is it? Nothing for me though. Why? Let me try F. Here we go. Graduate. Here it is. Yeah. Cool. There we go.
But we need to see
Okay. How do you? Okay, what about a clicker? Is that it?
because
Testing. Oh. How's everybody doing today? Thank you so much for having me. It's been about a year this time, I think, since I was last in front of this group. So I appreciate the vote of confidence. And you might say, well, what vote of confidence? Well, you invited me back, so I probably didn't do that bad of a job, or at least that's what I tell myself from last year. As was shared earlier, I'm Dr. Brian Samuel. I'm the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer here for K-State. And it's my distinct pleasure to speak with you about something that's very important to me, and that is diversity and inclusion, and more specifically, how to approach putting together a diversity statement. How many of us have jobs already lined up? Okay. How many of us hopefully will have a job either as a research faculty or a tenure track faculty or some kind of employment utilizing the degree that you're earning soon? Everybody's hand should go up, way up high. Right? Unless, of course, you got the Powerball numbers. Now, if you got the Powerball numbers, you don't need that job. But most of us don't have the Powerball numbers, and so we tend to think about employment as a very viable option for meeting our needs. Well, before you can get one of those jobs, many institutions, not all, but a lot of them are going to ask you about something called diversity and inclusion. And the point of my speaking to you today is to kind of give you some things to think about in drafting that statement that'll help you stand out from other applicants, especially in those cases where diversity and inclusion is a key component of that university's identity and who they are, where they want to go. All right, so the first thing I want to say, can we, let me see if I can slide that. Yeah. Is that okay? All right. Developing a diversity statement is a process, okay? Like most things that you do, it's a process. It's a reflection of who you are, what your experiences have been, where you're coming from, where you're heading, how you plan on getting there, who might come along with you, the whole 9 yards. It's a process. And it's not something that you usually are gonna be able to write in one take. For those of you who did theses or dissertations and things of that nature, it took you a little bit, right? Well, same thing here. And probably not as long, but it will certainly not be something that you'll sit down and put together in 5 minutes or something like that and be done with it and it's good forever. Probably not gonna work. You're probably gonna have to put some time in it. So where do you begin? As I said, it's a process. There are a lot of different things to think about in creating it. Like, where are you headed? What school are you really interested in? What is their thoughts, their directives, their guiding principles and values and things of that nature relevant to diversity and inclusion? That should tell you a lot about the type of institution and what's going to be important for you to demonstrate in the materials that you submit. What is a diversity statement? And that may be something very different from individual to individual. Sometimes it may be about sheer numbers, the number of people from different backgrounds that are represented. Sometimes it may be about race or ethnicity. Sometimes it may be gender. Sometimes it may be religion or first generation status, low socioeconomic status. It could be any number of different things and something altogether different depending on which institution you're applying to and where you want to go, what your experiences have been. So what is a diversity statement? You're going to have to kind of figure that out. And figuring it out means researching the institutions that you apply to. And before we close, I'm going to show you a couple of things that I think will help you. You also got to know, why is it important? Why do this at all? And believe it or not, there was a time you could get a job in American higher education. All you had to do was have the credentials, the experience, the passion, the drive, want to do it, send your stuff in, and nobody asked you about diversity. Nobody asked a question about what you thought, why it was important to you, what you're going to do or not do, et cetera, et cetera. So before you start writing a diversity statement or drafting a diversity statement as a beginning to this process, a couple of things we want you to think about is, how do you embody diversity? Some people and some institutions will see that as being race, ethnicity, minority, underserved, what have you. But everybody you come in contact with represents the diversity continuum. There are no two people that have the same experience no matter where you come from, no matter where you're headed or where you're going or how you plan on getting there. You got rural backgrounds, urban backgrounds. You got people from spiritual and religious backgrounds. You got people who don't believe in God. You got people who may have been a fourth or fifth generation college graduate. You got some students or graduates rather who may be the first person in their family to ever go to school. And none of these identities are the same for everybody. We're all a part of this diversity fabric, every one of us. So understand that. Ask yourself, how has your experience with diversity impacted your personal growth? I'll tell you one of mine. When I first went to college, I had no experience working with individuals of Indian descent, none whatsoever. Never engaged, never seen individual from that background. And for the longest time, I was walking through campus and I was saying what's up to these individuals. And I was doing it in the way that a kid from an urban inner city school would do it. And that is, you throw your head back like, what's up? What's going on? Right? And no one would respond. And it took me sharing my frustration about, being snubbed or, dissed, if you will, when you disrespect somebody by not speaking back or whatever, with another person before they told me that this guy had no idea what I was doing. He said, he probably think you got some kind of tick or something. He don't know what you're doing. You walk him doing this. I'm like, oh, I didn't understand it. That was one of my first experiences with diversity and inclusion. And it helped me to know that, where I come from and the things that I know and the things that I value and the things that have helped shape and make me me are not the same things for every other individual on that campus. I mean, there was a lot of different music to listen to. There certainly was a lot of different food to eat. Life was different for a lot of different people. So ask yourself, how has your experience with diversity impacted your professional growth? How has it impacted you professionally? Anybody? Brave souls? Not one? Yes, ma'am.
Able to collaborate with different students, faculty, colleagues that don't look like you or sound like you or think the same as you.
That's right. Absolutely. And sometimes you learn things. Sometimes, like the example I just shared with you, you unlearn things. You learn what not to do or what doesn't work, or that everybody doesn't come from the same background. And the fourth question, I think, is very important. How will you contribute to increasing the diversity of your profession? What's your mind's eye telling you about 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road when you're an endowed chair or a provost or something like that? What will be your legacy in increasing diversity in your profession? Any chemists in here? Anybody a chemist? No chemistry? Biology? You're a chemist? What?
Chemistry.
Chemistry. What's going to be your legacy in increasing the diversity of chemists across the country, across the world for that matter? You don't have to answer. I just thought later on we're gonna have an example from a chemistry professor, so I thought I'd just point that out and pick on somebody brave soul. So when we think about all those things, they can kind of help guide you in, you know, how to approach or how to think about putting a good statement together. I can't make this thing click. All right. Okay. Yeah, try. Uh-oh. All right. So in order to be grounded, well-grounded, you got to have some kind of philosophy, something that guides you into thinking about diversity and inclusion. Anybody have a diversity philosophy right now? Okay. But there's usually some type of principle or philosophy or something that guides you in thinking about most things, right? You drive a certain way to work because you want to avoid the school traffic or something, or you want to avoid the construction or something. There's some kind of philosophy that puts you into some type of direction, one way or another. No matter how you think about it or how you approach life, there's usually an underlying philosophy. My philosophy is based on this book right here, Building a House for Diversity. And it's a book that's written by a gentleman by the name of Roosevelt Thomas. And probably about 20 years ago, he wrote this book. And he said that there was a giraffe who built a house for a giraffe. And it was a nice, beautiful house for a giraffe. And being the kind of giraffe that he was, he knew an elephant that was a pretty cool guy, good elephant, you know. And he wanted to invite the elephant to come into his house. So he did. But the doors were built for a giraffe and they were really tall, but they weren't wide, so the elephant could not get through the doors. So he expanded the doors so the elephant could get in. So the elephant comes in and he wants to be hospitable. He wants to be a good host like all of us, right? He said, enjoy yourself, sit down, you know, grab a beer, do whatever you do. This is your house, mi casa, su casa, this, that, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he, you know, just told the elephant, just relax, be cool. No big deal. The phone rings, giraffe goes up to answer the phone, leaves the elephant by itself. The elephant decides, well, okay, I'm gonna have me a seat. And he sits down on the couch and one end went way up and it broke in two and this, that, and the other. And then he tried to turn around and move around and maneuver in the house. And all of a sudden he's knocking down the drapes, knocking over the lamps, and light fixtures are all falling out the sky and everything. And the giraffe come back and said, what in the world is going on here? And the elephant said, well, I'm afraid that this house isn't built for me. It can't accommodate me. And he said, well, you sure have made much of a mess. You know, I really wanted you to be here too. I wanted you to be here. I wanted us to be good friends. I wanted everything to work out. So I tell you what, why don't you go home, lose 3,000 pounds, shave your tusk, and wipe all that mud off your back. And when you come back, everything will be good. And the elephant said, well, I am an elephant. I'm supposed to have long tusks, symbolize who I am in my herd. And I'm supposed to weigh 5,000 pounds. And the mud that you want me to take a bath and wash off, it keeps the flies off the nerves of my skin. So I'm afraid that if I did those things that you need me to do to fit in, I wouldn't be an elephant anymore. I'd be an aardvark. I don't think this place is going to work for both of us. And so the elephant leaves and goes on about his business. Well, the giraffe had good intentions, great intentions. He wanted diversity, he wanted to be inclusive, but he really didn't understand what that meant, okay? He really didn't understand what it meant to be diverse and inclusive. And if he had, he would have built a house that was a little more welcoming, furniture that could withstand the weight of an animal such as an elephant, you know, doors that would allow persons of different sizes, I said persons, animals of different sizes, to go in and out with ease. And the parable got a lot of examples that you can use. But my philosophy of diversity is built around this book. So I'm gonna be valued, I'm gonna be welcomed, but yet if I come into the environment, do I have to become an aardvark to be accepted? The answer to that question is yes. That's not diversity. I should be able to be the elephant I am, tusk, mud, weight and all, and be okay. If I can do that, I'm fine. It is a diverse and inclusive and welcoming environment. That's my philosophy. I encourage all of you to look around, you know, do some reading, talk to some individuals, think about some things you've had experience with, and develop your own philosophy to guide you in thinking about diversity. Personal diversity. What is it that makes you diverse? Like I said, we all got our backgrounds. We come from different stories, different environments, different communities, all different types of affiliations. Some of us are parents, some of us are not parents and glad about it, you know, right? What makes you diverse? When I started working in this area, I knew I was a first generation college graduate. I was a Pell recipient. I was an individual with a disability. I was a Black male. I can go on and on and on and on about all these things that made me touch the diversity continuum. And all of you have that same story. Maybe you're a parent. Maybe you have a religious affiliation. Maybe you, in these days and times, back when I started, political affiliation wasn't a big deal, but it probably is today. What is it that makes you diverse? What's your definition? How do you define it? What does it mean to you? When I think about the elephant and the giraffe, it leads me to a diversity definition where people or animals, if you want to stick with the book, but people who come from different backgrounds and experiences can mix and interact and engage with each other meaningfully and well. It's one thing to have the representation, the numbers. It's something else to have that opportunity to interact well with each other and have people be heard and respected for the diversity of their opinions. You know, I've been in this business a long time, and I can talk about all the different industries, like IBM, for example. In 1978, I think it was, there was a lady who worked for IBM, and don't quote me on the date. I know it happened, but I may be getting the date confused. And she went to the CEO of IBM and said, you know, I would love to have a computer for my house where I can do my budgets and I can write stuff and do all these different things. And the CEO and all the leadership team, you know, all men, said, well, yeah, you really don't know anything about this. Leave those decisions to us. Nobody wants a computer in their home. They want to go to work on their computer, and leave work at work. How did that decision go for IBM? Anybody? How do you think that turned out? Not good. Not good at all. Not good at all. Why? Because at that time, that particular organization didn't value opinions of others, or people who weren't male and white at the time. So you need a working definition for diversity. In my experience, there have been two major components: classroom diversity and structural or interactional diversity. If you are going to put together a good statement, one, if not both of these, will be represented. Classroom diversity, the incorporation of knowledge about the diverse groups and identities, perspectives, et cetera, into the curriculum. Structural and interactional diversity is the opportunity to interact with people of diverse backgrounds in the broad campus environment. And we're going to give you some examples of both of those. Demonstrable commitment to classroom diversity. A lot of different ways you can do that. You can do co-curricular academic support or programs in the majors and such. Any engineers here? Engineering? What part? Both of you? Civil, mechanical, what? Both? Okay. Well, there's NSBE, right? And women in STEM, which could also work for the gentleman up front in chemistry. Multicultural programming. Maybe there are people from marginalized, underrepresented, historically underserved communities and populations that you can bring to campus to talk about your particular profession. Maybe they've done something worthy of notation. Incorporating the awareness of diversity issues, trends, and practices as part of the tenure review and the evaluation process. This is less about you and more about the institution. But if you are able to say that you've done these things across the diversity continuum, then that's better for you, more often than not. Creation of learning activities that provide real-world application. One of my strongest desires for Kansas State University and all of American higher education is that when something happens in the real world, we figure out a way to incorporate that into our classroom experiences. If you got something that's trending in your area, if you got something that's really impactful going on across the world in your area and you're not talking about it in your classroom, shame on you. I don't know any other way to say it. Any business majors in here? Anybody got a business degree? No? All right. Understanding of cultural issues. One size does not fit all. Different students will have different cultural issues and concerns. And, you know, if you're of the opinion that people are just too sensitive, or you need to stick it out or tough it out or this, that, and the other, or even worse, well, I had to go through this, and this. And so I feel no pity for you because you had to go do this challenge. Not that you have to have pity for individuals, but you got to understand that some people have different situations. And we need to do our best to kind of help our students get through some of those issues. Using multiple learning styles and instructional techniques. You'll hear me say time and time again, one size does not fit all. Some of your students may be visual, some of your students may be auditorial, Some of them might like projects and special assignments and stuff like that. Figuring out what it is that can help each student demonstrate proficiency and excellence in that field of study. Employment of formative and summative assessment strategies. Most faculty will only do summative or summative. They'll tell you what grade you earn. Anticipation of student needs. If you're in, what's your name? I'm sorry? Hantel? Hanton. If you're teaching chemistry and you got a big class of 60 or 80 or 90, right? You may not be able to give every student some individual time, but those students will have individual needs. And so the last one, as an example, is sustained partnership with campus and community entities. Very important. Student organizations, community entities, advising groups, so forth and so on. How do you demonstrate your commitment to classroom diversity? This is a sample of a diversity statement from a syllabus here at Kansas State University. And I won't tell you which professor, but she says, Kansas State intellectual community is enriched and enhanced by our diversity. By allowing diverse students to interact with and learn from each other, this course is better equipped to prepare all students for productive contributions in a global world. Through interactions with diverse populations, students develop an ability to recognize the importance, contributions, and legitimacy of multiple perspectives, cultures, and diverse groups. So she's talking about why it's important and some ways that students can get out of it what they need. I put this up here because some of the jobs that you will apply for will ask you for a copy of your syllabus. And I can't tell you how many times I used to be a director of affirmative action and equal employment opportunity. And a part of that job required looking at the materials that people submitted. And we always got the transcript, we always got a cover letter, we always got a vita, right? We got that teaching philosophy, diversity statement, this, that, and the other. We got all the things that the advertisement said do. But then when we got to the syllabus, this person who swore they were committed to diversity had no diversity statement. None whatsoever. How do you think that turned out for them? Somebody? It didn't go very well. You're applying for a job and they ask you for a diversity statement and a teaching philosophy and some of this other kind of stuff, and then you get to the syllabus and you don't have a diversity statement, they might think that's a red flag. They might. If they don't, then they really weren't serious about getting it from you in the first place. Structural and interactional diversity. This is employing the interests, backgrounds, and associational opportunities of all members of campus to prepare students for living in a diverse and ever-changing world. This is simply bridging the learning opportunities that differences can create. Students develop an ability to recognize the importance, contributions, and legacy of multiple perspectives, cultures, and diverse groups. You saw that previously, right? It's in both places, classroom and structural and interactional diversity. Students from diverse backgrounds have the ability to meaningfully engage with one another. So by looking at those two components, one, you got the numbers and people here and some things that you do in the classroom to kind of help make them make this work. And the other one is about the interaction, how you help them engage, connect, explore, so forth and so on. And this is a sample, demonstrable commitment to structural and interactional diversity from another institution. I had some handouts that I left with Dr. Montalone. Are they here? And we're gonna pass those out. It come from the California school system. And it just give you some examples of what some people have put together for their diversity statements. And with that, I'm going to show you one thing, and then we'll take, do I have time? Okay. I want us to take a look right here at this assistant professor of classical and medieval studies at Bates College. Can y'all see that? Let's see, where candidates in that first paragraph, about halfway down, candidates with demonstrated success in teaching marginalized and underrepresented students are encouraged to apply. Research and teaching areas are open, but we welcome scholars who integrate existing methodological and theoretical orientations of medieval studies to examine issues of equality, power, difference, and identity, who work in digital humanities or who consider links between the past and the contemporary world. And if you scroll down, it says, please submit a letter stating your qualifications, both scholarly and pedagogical, for this position, as well as your interest in teaching at a small liberal arts college, such as Bates, a writing sample of no less than 20 pages, a teaching statement that includes your training and experience in teaching a wide range of marginalized and underrepresented students through active learning strategies, and a sample syllabus or course outline. So when they go through and they got 80 applicants for this one job, they're gonna look at all of those. And if you get past the cover letter piece and get down to the syllabus and you don't have a diversity statement on your syllabus, that could be sufficient enough to remove you from consideration. So when I say know what the institution wants and give them what they ask for, this is what I mean. And with that, I'm going to welcome any questions or rude remarks that you might have. Yes, ma'am.
So when you say the syllabus for the diversity statement, like what do you mean by that?
The syllabus, on your syllabus, most institutions will have some expectations, right? Around class attendance or accommodations or any number of different things that they might prescribe for you. Some institutions will also require a diversity statement. This institution is saying it does. What's your commitment to diversity? How do you engage students, faculty, or what have you? Something that talks about how your talent, skills, abilities, credentials mesh with the importance of diversity, which they've said at an institutional level is important to them. This is Bates College. Some institutions will require this. A lot of them will. Yes.
You mentioned that there's that's a talk and give an example about the Kingston diversity. So, what's the example?
Oh, did I skip? Did we not do that? You are absolutely right. I thought I knew. Here it is. I have mentored over 100 students in my laboratory, including 22 students who have received their PhDs under my guidance. 60% of them have been women. So that's why I was asking him about his vision and plan for increasing diversity in the field of chemistry. On the national level, in my commitment to honoring and promoting women, students at all levels, I was the National Director of Student Awards for the Iota Sigma Pi and Honor Society for Women Chemists for 3 years. As the National Director of Student Awards for Iota Sigma Pi, I was responsible for expanding the application pool for the 3 awards given by the society. More recently, I co-chaired the Association in Women in Science American Chemical Society Awards Task Force. In that role, I worked to increase the number of women nominated and selected to receive national awards for their scientific and technical accomplishments from the ACS. I'm sorry, I skipped that. So this is one of those examples where this particular faculty member is saying that they've been engaged and working quite significantly with members of marginalized, underrepresented, and underserved communities. Any other questions or rude remarks? I'm happy y'all don't have rude remarks. Yes.
Question. So, like in your diversity statement, when you write it, you said the situation of a story of giraffe and elephant. So, like, how do you, like, in your diversity statement, when you say that, like, you're going to fit like diverse crowd from diverse backgrounds, so does it, like, if you are completely inclined towards the diversity and not the majority of it, so will that be like going against you?
I don't think. I am a bit unapologetic about that. You know, I think it's important that institutions recognize where there are strengths and challenges, right? And one of our challenges has been, for example, women in chemistry. So for me, if I'm a chemist, to say that, you know, recognizing that there is a parity gap of 45% in incumbency for women faculty and men faculty, I've worked or dedicated my life to dealing with this particular issue or something like that. I don't know that that's bad. I don't think it's bad. I think it says a lot about who you are and what's important to you, and that should be a value for that institution. That's my philosophy. You know, I'm of the opinion that if you have an opportunity for improvement and an opportunity for growth, for somebody to say that, hey, that's right down their area, that's their passion or what they've been doing for a long time or good at it, I don't know why that would be a bad thing.
So like in this example, the faculty like person has already mentored a couple of students. But for those who are just starting, beginning their career as a faculty, and those like you might mentor undergrad students, but like how would you present or how would you propose your diversity, like whose ideas in the diversity statement?
I would talk a little bit about what I know is the current status of those things. For example, when I was hired to come to Kansas State University as the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, one of the things that was very important to me was that at that time, we were graduating 9% of African-American men. So out of every 100 African-American men that we brought to campus, only 9 of them got a degree. So that was important to me. And so I said one of the things that would be important for me to be engaged in and work on and this, that, and the other would be increasing the achievement or reducing the achievement gap, rather. Increasing the achievement and reducing the achievement gap for students in those populations. And then I talked a little bit about what my experience in that area has been at other institutions. If you don't have it, you can talk about it being a vision or an area where you would like to work. Something else, when you get into these tenure track lines, you got to be able to manage your time, right? So, you know, that this person talked about 20 students who received the PhD. Well, you can help 20 students get the PhD, but never make the requirements for tenure because you're doing all your time advising and that kind of thing. So you got to have a good balance between teaching, research, and service. Yes.
These folks who are earlier in their careers talk about their experiences during maybe their graduate education.
Absolutely.
Working with individuals from other backgrounds.
Absolutely.
Very different circumstances, how they see things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How many of you taught classes as a part of your graduate assistantship or your graduate experience? A few? Yeah, I got to think that many of you had some opportunity to engage people from different backgrounds. Maybe, I think you asked about or made a statement about collaboration or something earlier. Maybe you had an opportunity to do some research with someone from a different discipline or a different background or something like that. There's a lot of ways to get it done. And there's no magic bullet, so to speak. Your statement may look very different from mine. The important thing is that you're able to put something together that's genuine, authentic, and representative of you. Any other questions?
Can we get a copy of the presentation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll send it to you. Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem at all. So what do you, can I ask them a question? Anyone that's so bold, what are you most concerned about in the application process?
Generally,
Yeah.
being chosen.
Being chosen? Okay. Okay. Okay, when I say concern, I mean like what gives you pause or what gives you concern or keep you kind of up at night, you know, about the application process? Yes.
Okay, so I'm actually in the process of applying for academic positions right now. And something that makes me nervous is that I may not be, so this kind of goes for teaching and research, but I may not be as accomplished as others in the applicant pool. And so am I going to be looked over as a outgoing graduate student as compared to somebody who already has a PhD and may have already worked at another university, but now they're trying to go for the same university that I'm applying to. But then secondly, you know, for some universities who want to see your effectiveness as a teacher and they want your T-vals, I think there's a ton of research that says that T-vals, especially against women, can be very biased in ways that they are not against men.
Women, minorities, persons with disabilities, so forth and so on. Asians.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for me to hand over my T-vals when I might have remarks on there from disgruntled students who don't like my attitude or like the way that I dress or something very objective and it doesn't actually have anything to do with my teaching, that makes me nervous as well. Yeah.
And I got two thoughts about that. A part of me want to say that's unfortunately the nature of the beast. But the second part of me, the diversity officer in me, wants to say that there's a way to deal with that, just like what you said. If you have a couple of qualitative statements or marks of strongly disagree or whatever it is, I don't know how we do it here, but that show up from time to time, those, in my opinion, may be statistical outliers as opposed to a general norm. You know, usually you can tell when a teacher is doing not a good job because those kind of comments are consistent all across the board. No matter who you talk to, no matter how many classes you teach in 3 classes this semester, and all 3 of them got you at a 1.28. All of them. That's indicative of some kind of challenge. But when you see you got 90 kids in a class and 3 of them said, you know, you weren't approachable or this, that, and the other, et cetera, that's probably not a good indicator of who you are as a teacher. But you are spot on. Sometimes those tools don't take into account a lot of things, particularly gender, race, speech patterns and rhythms, and some of those other kind of things that make people get lower marks as opposed to others. Yes?
I have never seen a job ad that asks actual results in
Oh, it happens though. Yeah, it happens. And if not in the ad itself, certainly by the time you make the short list to visit the campus or something like that, yeah, I've seen that quite a bit. In addition to the reference letters and teaching evals and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But if you articulate those concerns and how that is not indicative of who you are as a teacher and what have you, maybe you got a department head or a faculty member, a mentor or something who can speak to your teaching, has done an observation of you or something like that, then you can use that data to kind of set the record straight. Because like it or not, almost all of us at one time or another are going to show up on Rate My Professor. It's going to happen. Get over it. Yes.
I wanted to just follow up on something you just said, which is a really good point, that new referees can help address issues that you might have, like, you don't have a publication because there's another student working on it, and they can
Well.
specifically advocate for you by helping you explain, oh, this person took a year off to have a child. You know, they can help explain deficiency, perceived deficiency.
Yeah. And you talked about you said somebody's coming from another institution and already been teaching or something, or yada, 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 and you're in the same pool with them, right? Well, your research stream, what's important to you? Sometimes people will look at that from the lens of compliment, and compliment can be like us or add to us. It just kind of depends on what that department see as compliment, right? Maybe they want more researchers along this same stream that they're doing because they want to be the premier institution in this area. Or maybe they want someone that's going to add some diversity in the research depth and qualifications of that department. And by bringing something different, you know, everybody can't do that, right? All right, so we're concerned about getting a job, and we're concerned about competing with others who may have already had some teaching experience, right? What about you get this job, it's at the institution you want to be at, and now you got to negotiate your first salary. What are you going to ask for? I can tell y'all already know, so just shout it right out. More what? More money.
Equal pay
Equal pay. How do you know what equal is?
compared to the pay that's like on average in the nation, and then for your research experience and the designation that you're getting, you should be an assistant professor. So look for a nationwide survey, and there should be some estimates. So based on that,
Coupa HR, write that down. C-U-P-A-H-R. Coupa HR. You go to Coupa HR, and it will give you the faculty salary data for similarly situated institutions based on the academic disciplines that you are interested in. Okay, now something else. That's going to tell you the national average based on whether you're a research one or regional institution or teaching only or something like that, the size of the student body, so forth and so on. But it's not going to tell you an awful lot about that school, right? There's something called internal equity. Write that down. Internal equity, internal equity. Internal equity is about you getting your job and not earning $30,000 less than somebody else who got the same job. You might care about that. You might. If you don't going in, I guarantee you before you leave, you'll care. Because all the raises and salary bumps and all those things will be based on your base salary, which is the salary that you came in with. So if you start out of line, you will end out of line. What else? What about your teaching load? How many preps you gonna have? What's reasonable? What we do, Dr. Montalone, 3 and 3?
Depends on the discipline. Most of the science departments are 1 and 1 or 2 and 1.
1 and 1 or 2 and 1. So you get to some institution and maybe they want you to have 4 preps. How you feel about that? What are you gonna ask for? The department head or the dean gives you a call and you're the person. They want you, they need you. You gotta think, you better be thinking about this now, because when you do get those calls, that ain't the time to go into, and you certainly don't wanna just accept the first thing they throw at you without thinking about it. How you gonna get there? Who said that? Negotiate? All right, so what are you gonna negotiate? What are you gonna ask for? So you get the salary you want and you got internal equity, but you gotta go from here to Boston on your own dime. How many of us are ready to do that? Huh? You might want to ask for reimbursement. You might. At a very young age, I made the decision I'm not going to any institution that isn't willing to pay reimbursement or pay for me to go there. If you got families, you're going to uproot your families. You're going to travel from Kansas to wherever, California, Boston, Texas, this, that, and the other. That's going to cost some money. And if you don't ask for it, I promise you this, if I've said nothing else that's truthful today, you don't ask for it, you will not get it. Raise your hand if you believe that. If you don't ask for it, you will not get it. Guaranteed. They will hire you, they will let you come on board. You can teach 4 or 5 preps, both semesters, and work yourself crazy, and they'll let you do it. You have to look out for you. What else are we gonna ask for? Course release? That's a good one. And maybe not year 1, but year 2 or year 3, you're doing what you need to do. You got good evaluations, you're doing some scholarship, you got some publications in the hopper. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody need a mentor? Huh? Be good to have somebody. Who can help me navigate this tenure review process in the department? Who can help me navigate the campus landscape, politics, and some of these other kind of things outside the department? Some kind of way, you might need at least 1, some cases 3, 4, 5 mentors. I like to tell people you need a mentor team. You need a team of people. One person may not be able to do everything.
So is that something you would actually say as part of your negotiation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I didn't know if that was, I guess it goes back to what you're saying, if you don't ask for it, you don't get it, but I guess I figured that was kind of.
Absolutely. Politics, unwritten rules, right? Yeah, you need somebody to kind of help bring you along. good institutions have some type of mentoring apparatus, and usually that means when you get hired, they assign you a mentor. Doesn't necessarily mean that you will be mentored, but they will usually say, okay, we're gonna ask John or Tom or Tammy or somebody to work with you. And what happens from that, who knows? But yeah, there are some things that you need to, matter of fact, if Dr. Montalon, maybe next year, maybe I could do the diversity statement and negotiating your first, negotiating your first contract. Some things to think about, some things to look for, questions to ask, you know, that kind of thing. You know, looking at tax structure. I got a beautiful job. I won't tell you what school. And I felt real good about the salary and everything. And then when I got there and learned about the taxes, I felt blindsided. I'm like, what? Nobody told me that. I mean, I feel real good about that. You know, I read that letter, saw them commas and stuff. Oh, okay. And then I got my check. Yeah. City, county, education, all these different taxes coming out of it. Before you know it, I hadn't made a dime more than what I was making at my previous institution. Although the compensation was significantly higher, the tax structure from one place to another was significantly different. And when you go into these jobs, a lot of times you don't know those things and you don't ask those questions. And if you don't ask, they may not tell you. And if they don't tell you, you know, you be there and done moved and got an apartment, locked yourself into, or maybe even bought a house or something, and then you find out. That's not what you want. Anyway, I'm gonna thank y'all for having me, and anytime I can help you, let me know. And I'll email you that.
Sure, yeah.